The torches flickered across stone walls, casting shadows that danced like living things. Perfumed air mingled with the coppery scent of old blood, and the echo of footsteps in empty corridors seemed to whisper secrets long buried. In the heart of the English War of the Roses, power was never clean. Desire bled into law, and law bent to desire. Summons sealed with wax, ledgers filled with forbidden favors, and chambers locked against prying eyes. Every corner held scandal, lust, and hidden violence. Imagine nobles and heirs caught between obedience and obsession, their bodies and secrets tools in the cruel game of legacy. What was whispered behind tapestries could destroy crowns, marriages, even entire bloodlines. This is the story of lust, power, and ruin. A velvet seal cracked under trembling hands. Oak doors groaned as they opened, revealing a chamber where shadows slithered across tapestries. Perfumed candles dripped, smoke curling around the gilded ledger on the table. Power and desire collided in silence. One misstep here could ignite scandal, ruin, or death. The forbidden was always watching. The chamber's walls were lined with stone, cold and damp, absorbing every whisper. A lone torch sputtered, its flame threatening to go out as it cast long, quivering shadows. At the center, a ledger lay open, ink smudged by hurried hands. Lady Eleanor, heir to a minor York estate, had been summoned. The order was clear: attendance, discretion, and obedience. Every footstep echoed on the flagstone, merging with the distant clatter of armored guards outside. Perfumed notes had arrived that morning, instructing her to present herself alone. Sealed with crimson wax, the envelope bore the insignia of a powerful cousin, a man known for his control over favors and favors yet to be extracted. Eleanor's stomach tightened. She knew the rituals of power often carried a darker undertone. Counsel could easily turn into coercion. Every tick of the brass clock marked the passage toward exposure. Even her reflection in the polished armor of a waiting guard reminded her of vulnerability. The doors closed behind her with a muted thud, the latch clicking like a judge's gavel. A single thought lingered. What happens inside this room may never leave it, yet it could destroy everything she values. A ledger contained a record of payments, gifts, and favors, meticulously noted with dates, initials, and the occasional mark of the wax seal. A cleaner's whispered observations had reached the hallways. He does this often. The ledger notes who submits. Footsteps in corridors faded into murmurs of rumors. Servants hinted at prior appointments where obedience blurred into exploitation. Perfumed smoke mingled with the faint scent of candle wax and old ink, as if the room itself was aware of the crimes it contained. The air grew heavier with each recorded entry, each name confirming whispers Eleanor had feared. A gilded seal rested nearby, freshly impressed with a ring that bore the family crest, signaling authorization and inevitability. Even the guard outside seemed complicit, eyes shadowed under his helmet, understanding but never intervening. The sound of the pen scratching against parchment echoed like a ritual, counting down time until scandal could no longer be avoided. Eleanor's pulse quickened. She felt the invisible weight of witnesses, of a society that recorded transgressions in writing, that transformed desire into legal leverage. Every page turned promised more. Each tick of the clock, more danger. A folded note slid under the ledger. Eleanor recognized the handwriting immediately. A close ally of the family had left evidence. The parchment smelled faintly of rose oil, but its contents were sharp and damning. Initials, locations, and specific instructions detailing which nobles were entangled in forbidden acts. The margins contained shorthand that implied more than it wrote aloud. "This is the price of progress," it read in cryptic script. Eleanor's eyes traced each line, each seal impression, realizing the ledger was not merely a record, but a weapon. Orders, once whispered in the dark, now had documentation. The chamber's acoustics amplified the sound of her breathing, merging with distant footsteps and the tick of the clock. The torchlight flickered violently, revealing hidden scratches on the table, evidence of prior struggles. Every stroke of ink, every pressed seal tied scandal to power, desire to authority. Eleanor understood the implications. To be seen here with these papers was to be implicated. Rumors could now solidify into undeniable fact, and allies could become suspects. The evidence was no longer abstract, it was tangible, ready to topple reputations, marriages, and alliances. The chamber emptied, yet the consequences remained, echoing like a tolling bell. Eleanor left, carrying the weight of knowledge that could shift loyalties and destroy lives. Public reaction, once these secrets leaked, would be immediate. Whispered gasps in halls, resignations behind closed doors, accusations written into official ledgers. The lesson was clear. Law and desire were intertwined, and order was always fragile when lust was involved. The power that summoned her now faced potential downfall, exposed by the very rituals designed to enforce obedience. Wax seals, perfumed notes, and meticulous ledgers ensured that every misdeed was recorded. Eleanor's resolve hardened. She understood that in a world where counsel could become coercion, awareness was a weapon. One misplaced document, one unnoticed signature could ignite scandal that consumed the powerful. The chamber's silence remained, heavy with secrets, shadows lengthening as candle flames guttered. She stepped into the corridor, carrying both fear and leverage, knowing that history would remember the acts, even if it disguised them under the veneer of ceremony. Every hallway, every locked door, every echo was a reminder. Power without accountability always invites ruin. Outside the chamber, whispers stirred like wind through the stone corridors. Seals had been broken, ledgers examined, and perfumed evidence shifted from hand to hand. Eleanor walked between shadows and light, aware that one misstep could ignite ruin. The game of desire and power had only begun, and the next move would shock the realm. A cold breeze seeped through the arrow slit. Shadows danced along the stone walls, flickering with torchlight that painted whispers in gold and black. The ledger lay open on a mahogany desk, detailing favors extracted in silence. Desire and obedience merged here, yet every mark promised scandal, every seal concealed danger beyond imagination. The private chamber was carved deep within the northern wing of the castle, where the scent of aged oak and smoked candles hung heavy. Tapestries depicting victories of York and Lancaster absorbed the flickering torchlight, turning familiar victories into sinister silhouettes. Lady Margaret, daughter of a minor Lancastrian lord, had been summoned under the guise of routine counsel. The summons arrived sealed in crimson wax, its ring-pressed insignia marking the hand of a powerful uncle known for extracting favors under the guise of duty. Every corridor she walked through resonated with muffled echoes of servants and guards, each step amplifying anticipation and dread. The chamber itself smelled faintly of rose oil, mixed with a metallic tang of ink from the open ledger resting on the desk. On the polished oak surface, quills lay ready, inkpots full, as if expecting records of deeds that were never meant to leave the shadows. The guards stationed at the threshold were statues of silent menace, their hands resting on hilts, watching without intervening. Every tick of the brass clock mounted tension. Every candle flare cast moving shadows across parchment, walls, and Eleanor's pale face. Here, ritual met risk. Counsel could evolve into coercion, and obedience could become documented evidence of scandal yet to unfold. The ledger chronicled payments, favors, and promises, annotated with dates, initials, and wax impressions. A servant had murmured in the corridors, "He inscribes what he can exploit." Margaret's eyes flicked over the entries. Each line blurred the boundary between duty and indulgence. The scent of perfumed candles mingled with the dusty ink, creating a thick, almost oppressive atmosphere. Each quill stroke resonated like ritual counting, marking time and transgression in the same motion. Footsteps on the stone corridor outside grew louder as whispers of prior gatherings reached her ears. Nobles summoned, favors demanded, obedience twisted into unspoken acts. A crimson wax seal sat on the corner of the ledger, fresh, warm, bearing the ring of her powerful uncle. The chamber's acoustics amplified the tiniest creak, the faintest murmur, transforming mundane sounds into instruments of dread. Even the tapestries seemed to watch, shifting with the flicker of flame, turning familiar historical victories into silent witnesses. Every notation in the ledger was a potential trap, every recorded favor a testament to desire and control. Margaret's pulse quickened as she realized that these entries were no longer abstract. They were proof, weaponized, waiting to expose those who underestimated secrecy. The balance of power rested on ink and wax, perfumed notes, and the silence of shadows. A folded handkerchief, pressed with a secret initial, slid silently under the ledger. Margaret recognized the scent, faint rose, layered with subtle musk, marking the hand of a loyal ally who understood the danger. On the fabric were small inscriptions, dates, initials, and locations that linked prominent nobles to acts whispered about, but never proven. The packet was both shield and threat. It revealed the hidden machinations, the controlled exchanges of desire for power. The chamber seemed to close in. The shadows deepened, folding over walls, ledger, and torch alike. Margaret traced each mark, realizing that the evidence transformed rumor into incontrovertible fact. The brass clock ticked louder, almost in tandem with her heartbeat, punctuating the rising peril. A wax seal, freshly impressed, rested on a nearby corner of the packet, its crimson hue a warning. Every mark was deliberate, every stamp a witness. The chamber's door, though closed, seemed to vibrate with the weight of secrets, each tick and footstep outside amplifying the threat. Orders once whispered, favors once demanded, were now documented. The ledger and handkerchief were instruments of revelation, and in that revelation lay the capacity to topple alliances, expose scandal, and alter the balance of power in ways that could never be undone. Margaret understood fully that knowledge was both armor and chain. Margaret exited the chamber, carrying the weight of documented secrets, aware that exposure could ignite immediate ruin. Each hallway she crossed, shadows clinging to the walls, whispered of consequences yet to arrive. The public, once the ledger's contents were revealed, would react with gasps in great halls, whispered accusations in corridors, and resignations concealed by polite facades. The lesson emerged clearly. Authority and desire were intertwined, and the mechanisms of control, wax seals, perfumed notes, and meticulous ledgers ensured that obedience and exploitation were inseparable. Even the quietest acts of compliance had the potential to become instruments of scandal when recorded. Margaret's footsteps echoed against stone walls, a rhythm both mortal and symbolic. Each step carried the knowledge of the chamber's rituals and the power they contained. The perfumed smoke of candles clung to her garments, marking her as witness and participant in acts hidden from public view. Every recorded favor, every seal pressed, and every whispered order created a map of vulnerability that could, if revealed, bring about political collapse, scandalous exposure, or personal vengeance. Margaret's mind catalogued possibilities, understanding that the shadows of desire and the weight of recorded power dictated the fate of all involved. The chamber behind her remained silent, yet its contents had already begun to reshape history in ways only she could foresee. Outside, corridors stretched like arteries of secrecy. The ledger, handkerchief, and wax seals now existed beyond shadows,
ready to ignite scandal with each careful hand that touched them. Margaret's understanding of desire, power, and documentation was complete. Yet the next twist awaited, promising to shock the realm and challenge every alliance she trusted. A cold mist curled through the eastern battlements, carrying whispers of forbidden acts. Flickering torchlight revealed half-open doors, gilded ledgers, and velvet envelopes. Every step echoed in hollow halls, a prelude to scandal. Here, obedience and desire intertwined. Each seal and memorandum hinted at rituals that promised ruin and revelation alike. The chamber beyond the northern spiral staircase was cloaked in the scent of aged pine and candle smoke, mingling with traces of perfumed silk. Oak beams overhead groaned faintly, accentuating the suspense in the otherwise silent hall. Sir Thomas, a mid-ranking Yorkist noble, had been summoned by his cousin, the Duchess, under the pretense of reviewing estate inventories. The summons, enclosed in a velvet envelope with crimson wax pressed by the Duchess's signet, bore the ominous instruction, "Attend promptly. Obedience ensures favor." The room itself was an archive of secrecy.
Shelves lined with ledgers, velvet cushions set beside heavy desks, candles burning low, flickering shadows along every surface. The air felt thick, oppressive. Even the cold draft through the arrow slits carried the promise of hidden observation. On the desk lay a ledger marked with initials and small annotations, each entry detailing favors, allegiances, and whispered transactions that blurred personal desire with political leverage. Guards stationed near the chamber doorway remained statuesque, their presence a quiet but ever-present reminder of the consequences of misstep. Every step Sir Thomas took echoed ominously, counting time toward an unseen ritual. Here, counsel would transform, desire would be weaponized, and power would be meticulously documented, every motion observed, every reaction recorded in the ledger waiting to be filled. As the candles sputtered, Sir Thomas approached the desk, tracing ink-stained pages with tense fingers. Each line was a record of subtle coercion, favors rendered and alliances secretly manipulated. The perfumed handkerchiefs tucked between ledger pages hinted at clandestine encounters, while wax seals, still warm, confirmed that orders had been executed under surveillance. Servants whispered in corridors just beyond the thick walls. Snippets of conversation reached him, suggesting prior participants had been both rewarded and threatened. One entry noted a clandestine meeting, detailing time, location, and response to authority, a ritualized choreography where desire, fear, and hierarchy collided. The sound of the quill scratching parchment was amplified in the stone chamber, a rhythm that mirrored Sir Thomas's accelerating pulse. A perfumed envelope, half opened, revealed initials linking the Duchess to multiple nobles, confirming whispered rumors. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the chamber walls, the flicker of flames turning oak panels into spectators of scandal. Every annotation in the ledger transformed rumor into proof. Each mark, stamp, and signature encoded acts that could ignite political collapse or personal ruin. The narrow windows framed a moonless sky, casting only pale light upon these instruments of control. Sir Thomas realized that the ledger's entries were not passive records. They were a network of power, coercion, and secret desire, waiting to be weaponized. A sealed packet slid silently across the polished desk surface, its weight deliberate, its contents promising revelation. Inside were memoranda, pressed flowers, and small handwritten notes, each bearing initials, dates, and marginalia connecting the Duchess to acts previously only hinted at in court gossip. The brass seal bore the unmistakable impression of the Duchess's ring, warm and recent,
a tactile confirmation of authorship. The chamber's acoustics amplified the faintest shuffle of paper, the quill's scratch, the soft click of seals being pressed. Sir Thomas lifted a note, recognizing the scent of rose and musk, markers of clandestine observation. Every slip of parchment tied desire to duty, transgression to documentation. Candlelight danced over embossed letters, revealing hidden connections, confirming suspicions and threatening to unravel alliances. The clock in the corner ticked loudly, each second a reminder that secrecy was time-bound. Outside, distant footsteps echoed, mixing with murmurs of unseen servants and guards, heightening tension. The evidence transformed the chamber into a crucible. What had begun as routine counsel became an exposition of desire weaponized, control exerted through perfumed notes, and every recorded action a step toward scandal. Sir Thomas recognized fully that these documents were more than proof. They were leverage, capable of both protection and ruin, a map of vulnerabilities concealed beneath the veneer of etiquette. The packet's contents made clear that no act, no favor, and no indulgence would remain hidden if the wrong hand wielded this knowledge.
Sir Thomas departed the chamber with the weight of illicit knowledge pressing upon him. The stone corridor seemed to breathe with shadows, each step echoing like a drumbeat of impending exposure. The ledger, notes, and sealed packet represented more than secret transactions. They embodied a power structure that blended coercion, desire, and strategic observation. The potential fallout was immense. Public revelation could force resignations, discredit alliances, or topple influential figures under the veneer of scandal. Candles smoldered in the chamber, leaving a lingering scent of perfumed oil, ink, and secrecy. Every seal and annotation reinforced the lesson that control and desire were inseparable in the upper echelons of power. Where it started as a summons for counsel revealed the machinery behind compliance. Meticulously recorded acts, enforced through ritual, monitored in shadows, and codified in wax, ink, and notes. Even minor actors in this network, like servants and clerks, played roles that could pivot rumor into revelation. Sir Thomas understood that knowledge equated to both armor and burden. Every observation, every recorded favor, and every sealed note carried the potential for ruin or protection, depending on who wielded it. The chamber behind him remained silent, yet its instruments of power, ledger, envelopes, and perfumed slips already exerted influence over events yet to unfold. Secrets documented here had begun shaping destinies before a single word reached the court. The castle corridor seemed longer now, shadows deeper, as Sir Thomas carried evidence of desire twisted into control. Every ledger entry, sealed packet, and perfumed note whispered of scandal, promising to reshape allegiances. And beyond the battlements, unseen eyes waited, ready to turn secrets into exposure, ensuring the next revelation would shock the realm. A chill seeped through the inner hallways, carrying the metallic scent of wax and ink. Velvet curtains fluttered over candlelit desks, hiding secrets of lust, power, and punishment. Every whisper of silk or shuffle of parchment was amplified, hinting at rituals of coercion and leaving a trail of scandal that could ignite the entire court. The eastern gallery of the Lancastrian manor was a labyrinth of shadows and polished oak floors. Each tapestry bore muted scenes of triumph and tragedy, yet here they seemed to witness acts far removed from valor, acts of desire and domination. Lady Eleanor, a young widow of notable beauty, had been summoned under the guise of reviewing household inventories. The summons, delivered in a crimson envelope, bore the family crest pressed into soft wax, accompanied by a note. Your compliance ensures favor. Hesitation invites scrutiny. The hall itself seemed alive with anticipation. The scent of burning tallow mingled with traces of amber, hinting at prior rituals.
Flickering torchlight painted the walls with trembling silhouettes. On the desk lay a ledger, margins filled with initials in shorthand, each entry a record of obedience extracted through persuasion or fear. Servants hovered just out of sight, their murmurs punctuated by distant footsteps, as if echoing the expectations of power. Every corner, every object, from perfumed gloves to brass candlesticks, became a potential instrument of manipulation. Eleanor stepped cautiously toward the desk, the sound of her heels on the polished floor reverberating through the gallery. She sensed that what began as routine documentation would transform, that desire, authority, and ritual would converge in ways impossible to resist. The ledger's pages revealed a meticulous catalog of favors and coercions, each entry annotated in a deliberate, clinical hand. Servants' whispers echoed through the gallery, fragments of prior encounters, the soft gasp of a chambermaid passing by, or the distant clink of a key in the northern lock. One notation referenced a controlled visit, indicating enforced proximity under supervision, while another detailed a perfumed envelope delivered post-ritual, its contents meant to verify compliance. Candlelight flickered against embossed seals, revealing initials of nobles whose participation had long been rumored. A brass inkwell trembled slightly as Eleanor traced her fingers along the entries, noting the precise timing recorded for each act, hour, minute, and witness present. The gallery seemed to pulse with the rhythm of observation, shadows elongating across walls as if reaching toward her. The sound of a distant harp, muffled behind thick doors, added an eerie cadence, heightening the sense that every move she made was being silently recorded. Each annotation transformed abstract rumor into tangible evidence of manipulation and control, revealing the methodical intertwining of desire, authority, and ritualized observation. The room felt alive, almost sentient, as if the tapestries, ledgers, and candles themselves were participants in a game of power and submission. Every detail, scent, sound, and shadow conspired to remind Eleanor that she was no longer merely a visitor, but a subject in an orchestrated performance. A small folded packet slid along the polished oak desk, its arrival unnoticed except by the subtle shift of a curtain. Inside were notes, pressed petals, and a velvet ribbon marked with wax seals bearing the Duchess's crest. Each element served as proof of previously whispered acts, enforced proximity, controlled gestures, and subtle dominance. The brass seal, still warm, confirmed the authenticity and immediacy of these commands. Eleanor's fingers trembled as she lifted the packet, inhaling the mingled scents of rose, amber, and tallow, each note a silent witness to prior rituals. A ledger entry, partially hidden beneath the packet, detailed the execution of the ritual, specifying who observed, when, and under what conditions, codifying desire as an instrument of power. The chamber's acoustics magnified the faintest shuffle of silk, the scratch of quill, and the soft thud of wax seals, creating an eerie soundtrack to the unfolding revelation. Outside, distant footsteps and muffled whispers added tension, suggesting that exposure could arrive at any moment. Eleanor realized that these artifacts, the packet, the ledger, the perfumed ribbon, were not merely proof, but instruments capable of enforcing compliance or delivering ruin. Each item carried the weight of consequence, a tangible manifestation of authority fused with desire. The discovery confirmed that secrecy was meticulously recorded and that even minor lapses could transform into scandal with devastating consequences. Eleanor retreated from the gallery, the packet clutched tightly in her hand. The polished floors seemed longer, the flickering torchlight harsher, and shadows more menacing. The evidence she now carried, ledger, packet, ribbon, symbolized both protection and peril. These items encoded a network of coercion, obedience, and desire that could dictate fates before the court or gossipers. Servants moved with silent purpose, doors closed with deliberate clicks,
and the scent of perfumed wax lingered in every corridor she passed. Each step reminded her that knowledge equated to power. Awareness transformed rumor into leverage. Public exposure could dismantle alliances, force resignations, or ignite whispered scandal, while discretion could preserve standing and safety. The gallery behind her retained only echoes, the soft murmur of pages turned, the scratch of quill, and the fading perfume of authority exercised through ritual. Eleanor understood that desire, codified through observation and recorded meticulously, wielded control far beyond the walls of the chamber. Even the smallest notation in the ledger, a signature, a seal, a timing, carried the potential to manipulate, protect, or destroy. The ritualized acts she now knew existed were evidence of an intricate balance: law and order, interlaced with desire and coercion, observation and secrecy, scandal and survival. Her understanding of power had transformed. She now grasped how secrecy could govern destinies before any word reached the court. The corridors whispered as Eleanor departed, the packet's weight pressing with unseen authority. Every candle, ledger, and sealed note loomed like silent witnesses. Scandal simmered behind oak doors, ready to ignite with the slightest misstep. In the shadows, observers waited patiently, ensuring that the next revelation would shatter not just reputations, but the balance of power. The west wing of the Yorkist palace reeked of incense and iron. Velvet drapes concealed flickering candlelight, and distant footsteps echoed against cold stone floors. A ledger lay open on a desk, its margins scribbled with names and times, whispering secrets of obsession, coercion, and acts that blurred the line between desire and dominion. Lady Margaret, niece of a powerful duke, arrived under the guise of attending a council on estate management. The summons bore the official seal of the duke himself, its wax warm to the touch, a subtle threat of obedience. The corridor was silent, yet heavy with anticipation. Tapestry swayed as if stirred by invisible hands, reflecting torchlight on the polished floor. Perfumed gloves rested on marble pedestals, their scent lingering like a memory of previous encounters. Margaret's footsteps echoed as she approached a mahogany desk where a ledger waited her scrutiny. Each page held shorthand entries, detailing favors, assignations, and rituals imposed upon courtiers. The sound of quills scratching, wax seals thudding, and distant harp strings created an ominous rhythm. Margaret sensed that the council was a pretext. Hidden beneath the mundane ledger entries lay evidence of manipulation, coercion, and illicit desire. The air seemed to hum, each shadow poised to reveal a secret. She could almost feel eyes upon her, not human, but the watchful gaze of recorded desire, of power exercised through ritual and observation. Every object, the seal, the ink, the parchment, hinted at a protocol where pleasure and authority intertwined, leaving no act unrecorded. Margaret's pulse quickened. She knew this visit would reveal more than estate inventories. Pages turned under Margaret's trembling fingers. Each entry was precise: date, time, observer, and method. A perfumed envelope, pressed flat by a weighted stamp, hinted at clandestine meetings. Whispered fragments of prior scandals seemed to resonate from the walls. A chambermaid's nervous murmur, a clerk's footstep behind the curtain, a faint sigh from the distant gallery. One entry read, "Proximity maintained for instruction, compliance verified by seal." Another detailed a ritualized encounter where obedience was measured not by words but by posture, gesture, and silence. The room's acoustics amplified every sound: the faint scratch of a quill, the soft shuffle of silk on stone, the click of brass candlesticks being adjusted. Shadows elongated across the walls, animated as though they were recording witnesses themselves. Candle flames trembled in rhythm with Margaret's heartbeat, highlighting the initials and marks beside each entry. Outside, distant steps and muted voices hinted at the presence of observers enforcing compliance.
Each detail transformed rumor into undeniable evidence, confirming that power, desire, and ritual had been methodically intertwined and meticulously documented. Margaret realized that each annotation, each pressed seal held potential leverage or threat, a mechanism to control, humiliate, or elevate according to compliance. The gallery felt alive, a silent jury ready to judge her every movement. A small folded handkerchief fell from between the ledger's pages, perfumed and pressed with a wax seal. Nestled within was a note. "This demonstrates compliance. The record is complete." The packet contained delicate tokens, petals, a pressed ribbon, and a fragment of parchment with initials scrawled in haste. Margaret recognized the code, a meticulous method of tracking influence, desire, and enforced proximity. Each token carried the weight of past encounters, transforming rumor into concrete evidence of ritualized dominance. The brass seal glinted in candlelight, affirming the authenticity of the document. The sound of a distant door latch, a muffled cough, and the soft tapping of quill created a tense soundtrack, magnifying the psychological intensity of the moment. Margaret realized that these objects were not mere relics. They were instruments of power, capable of compelling obedience, exposing scandal, and manipulating fate. The ledger, handkerchief, and ribbon formed a triad of control, a coded message of compliance and authority. Any breach of protocol could trigger public scandal, while secrecy ensured survival and favor. She inhaled the lingering scent, rose, amber, and faint iron, and felt the weight of a hierarchy recorded in meticulous detail. Margaret understood that her knowledge was both protection and peril. Wielded wisely, it could secure her position. Misstep, and it could destroy her. The evidence had flipped the balance, revealing the depth of surveillance and obsession within the palace walls.
Outside, the hall seemed to breathe, every corridor a testament to obedience and secret desire. Candles flickered like sentinels, and the wax seals glimmered as if alive. Margaret stepped cautiously, aware that each object she carried could ignite scandal or safeguard her. The next act of revelation was always just beyond the oak doors. The northern turret of the Lancastrian fortress smelled of damp stone and smoldering candle wicks. Faint echoes of chains clinking resonated in the hollow hallways, interlaced with the distant murmur of perfumed voices. A sealed summons rested on the oak table, hinting at hidden agendas, forbidden obsessions, and secrets long whispered behind closed doors. Sir Edmund, a trusted advisor and court scribe, entered the turret under the guise of routine correspondence review. The envelope he carried bore the heady wax seal of the Earl himself, embossed with the lion rampant, a symbol of authority that demanded immediate compliance. As he walked down the narrow spiral stairs, the scent of incense and melted wax enveloped him, mingling with the faint tang of iron from the nearby armory. The chamber at the turret's apex was dimly lit by sconces, casting long shadows over the rough-hewn stone walls. On a carved oak desk lay a ledger, its pages annotated with meticulous care, names, times, and assignments, each entry documenting compliance, favor, and ritualized submission. Sir Edmund's eyes traced a series of initials and checkmarks, each denoted acts of obedience, coercion, and pleasure wielded as instruments of power. A soft rustle from the heavy velvet curtains hinted at hidden witnesses. The distant echo of footsteps suggested that observation was constant. The ledger was more than paper. It was a blueprint of control, a record where desire and authority intertwined. Sir Edmund understood that the turret was not merely a workplace, but a stage where ritualized domination was enacted, witnessed, and codified, each act carrying potential scandal if exposed. The wax seal pressed into his palm seemed to pulse with silent command. Sir Edmund opened the ledger to reveal an array of detailed entries. Each line contained precise annotations: who was present, who observed, and how compliance was measured. A perfumed handkerchief fell from between pages, evidence of ritualized contact, pressed and marked with initials. Whispers from the adjacent gallery filtered through the stone walls. A maid's nervous murmur, a distant clerk's cough, a guard adjusting armor. Each sound seemed amplified, echoing the stakes within the chamber. One entry read, "Obedience verified, favor recorded, torchlight observation complete." Another noted positions and gestures executed under command, with compliance monitored and timed. Candles flickered, casting dancing shadows over the annotations and initials scrawled beside each name. The acoustic properties of the turret amplified every subtle noise: quills scratching, silks brushing, distant laughter or gasps from observers outside. The perfumed residue from envelopes and ribbons hinted at prior encounters, secret rendezvous, and the intertwining of authority and pleasure. Sir Edmund realized that the entries were instruments of both record and leverage, proof of obedience, evidence of ritualized encounters, and potential triggers for public scandal. Even minor missteps could be weaponized against courtiers, making secrecy the ultimate shield and threat. The pressure of recorded authority pressed down upon him. Knowledge itself became a tool of survival. Each observation and annotation transformed the chamber into a theater of power and psychological tension. A folded ribbon slipped from a ledger's page, scented with lavender and iron, pressed flat under the weight of authority. Nestled within was a small note, "Compliance observed, document retained." Alongside it, a pressed flower and initials in red ink suggested ritualized submission. Sir Edmund recognized the coded method. Each object signified both service and coercion, every detail meticulously recorded. The wax seal glimmered under torchlight, affirming the document's authenticity. Outside, the muted click of a latch and the soft shuffle of slippers across stone created an ominous rhythm. The evidence revealed the depth of orchestration within the turret. Observers, ritualized acts, and compliance monitored down to gesture and posture. The combined weight of ledger, ribbon, flower, and note transformed suspicion into proof. The turret was more than a chamber. It was a laboratory of desire and authority, where secrecy governed conduct and observation enforced obedience. Sir Edmund understood that possession of these objects was both power and peril. Public revelation could ignite scandal, while discretion ensured survival and influence. The ritualized precision recorded in these artifacts exposed not only acts of coercion, but the hierarchy enforcing them. Every gesture, every annotation, every sealed envelope carried meaning, a silent record of dominance, desire, and enforced compliance. The chamber became a nexus of secrecy, authority, and the psychological impact of observation. Sir Edmund tucked the handkerchief, ribbon, and note into his tunic, feeling their weight as instruments of authority and leverage. Candlelight flickered against the rough stone walls, casting anxious shadows over the chamber. Each object represented recorded acts of submission, ritualized observation, and the intricate interplay of desire and control. The gallery's acoustics, the distant shuffle of guards, the quill's scratch, the faint murmur of witnesses underscored the psychological tension embedded within the chamber. Awareness of these meticulous records transformed the narrative of power, law and ritual, authority and desire, secrecy and exposure. Each seal, each annotation, and each scented token indicated how dominance could be documented and weaponized, and how obedience could ensure favor or provoke scandal. Sir Edmund realized that knowledge was both protection and threat. Wielded wisely, it preserved status and influence. Mishandled, it could provoke ruin. The chamber had codified acts of power, coercion, and ritualized pleasure, demonstrating that observation and documentation were instruments of control as potent as any sword or decree. Every corridor, every locked door, every flickering candle reinforced the omnipresence of authority, making secrecy, ritual, and recorded compliance the ultimate currency of survival. Sir Edmund's comprehension of these mechanisms allowed him to navigate the hierarchy with precision, balancing secrecy and revelation in a dance as perilous as it was necessary.
The northern turret exhaled its secrets in flickering shadows. Wax seals gleamed like sentinels, and ribbons pressed with initials whispered of ritualized power. Sir Edmund moved carefully through the corridors, aware that each object could ignite scandal or secure authority. Beyond the next stone archway, another revelation waited silently, ready to surface. The great hall of the Yorkist keep reeked of incense and damp tapestries. Torches sputtered in the drafts from arrow slits, flickering across carved beams and stone floors. A ledger lay open on the dais, whispering secrets of obsession, ritualized domination, and forbidden desire that had been carefully hidden behind locked doors for decades. Lady Isolde, a trusted companion to the Queen, approached the dais with cautious steps. The hall's echoes magnified her every movement. The soft click of boots, the rustle of velvet skirts, the faint scent of perfumed candles lingering in the stone air. On the dais, a massive oak desk bore a ledger thick with entries, each line tracking compliance, favors, and coercion carried out in secret chambers across the keep. A crimson ribbon tied around a folded envelope bore the Queen's seal, a fleur-de-lis pressed into softened wax. As Lady Isolde lifted it, a muffled sound from the gallery hinted at hidden witnesses. Each annotation in the ledger described positions, rituals, and acts executed under the strict surveillance of those in authority. A pressed flower and initials on the envelope implied ritualized submission and carefully monitored pleasure. The hall seemed to breathe with tension, shadows moving like silent sentinels across stone walls. Isolde understood that this was not merely a record, but a web of control, obsession, and forbidden desire. Each tick of the clock, each whispering draft, amplified the weight of the secrets contained in the ledger. The sealed envelope pulsed with latent scandal, suggesting that even the smallest oversight could ignite revelation and upheaval. Isolde carefully opened the envelope, revealing a slip of vellum annotated with initials and symbols she recognized from previous secret entries. Each marked represented acts witnessed, measured, and codified, a meticulous record of obedience and coercion. From the shadowed balcony, a servant's soft murmur echoed, "They will know if anything is missing." Candlelight flickered across the vellum, illuminating pressed petals and perfumed ribbons left as evidence of ritualized encounters. A guard's boot scuffed the flagstone floor, sending vibrations that rattled the inked letters, while distant laughter from the kitchens above highlighted the acoustic tension of the hall. The annotations described acts performed under precise command, positions timed, gestures recorded, torches illuminating the ritual. Objects in the hall, gollops, braziers, tapestries, were part of the psychological framework, each contributing to enforced compliance and secrecy. Every sound, every scent, and every mark on the ledger conveyed both instruction and proof. Lady Isolde felt the weight of authority pressing down, the omnipresent surveillance and codified acts forming a lattice of control. Each observation, each annotation became a weapon and a shield, capable of igniting scandal or protecting the powerful. The hall seemed alive with the echoes of past transgressions, and each carefully documented act reinforced the tension between desire, secrecy, and authority. A folded handkerchief fell from the ledger's edge, pressed with the Queen's initials in red ink. Alongside it was a small packet sealed with wax, containing a pressed flower and a note, "For proof of compliance, retain for record." Lady Isolde recognized the significance. These were coded artifacts of ritualized submission, meticulously tracked to ensure obedience and enforce secrecy. The torches flickered as a draft swept through the hall, shadows leaping across tapestries depicting past battles and dynastic victories. The packet was evidence, both a key to understanding the obsession and a potential instrument for scandal if revealed. A soft click of the dais's latch and the distant shuffle of slippers underscored the ever-present observation.
The annotation in the ledger, combined with the handkerchief, flower, and note, revealed the orchestrated pattern of domination and ritualized acts of pleasure, monitored, timed, and meticulously recorded. Even the faint scent of lavender lingering on the ribbon suggested the presence of ritual and authority intertwined. Lady Isolde understood that possession of these objects granted knowledge, power, leverage, and the danger of exposure. The hall's acoustics amplified every small sound: the rustle of silk, the ink scratching quill, the whispering of witnesses in hidden galleries. Authority, desire, and secrecy coalesced into a structure where every recorded gesture was a tool, a weapon, and a potential scandal. The artifacts testified to the delicate balance between obedience and exposure, secrecy and revelation. Lady Isolde tucked the handkerchief, pressed flower, and note carefully into her sleeve, feeling the tangible weight of authority, coercion, and ritualized obedience. Candlelight reflected across the stone floors and carved beams, emphasizing the tension in every shadow. The hall had become a theater of power. The ledger's annotations codified acts of submission, ritualized observation, and psychological pressure, while torches, ribbons, and pressed flowers acted as silent instruments of control. Each recorded gesture revealed how dominance was exercised, measured, and weaponized, and how secrecy preserved authority. The acoustic properties of the hall, distant footsteps, quill scratching, faint whispers, amplified the omnipresent tension, reinforcing the psychological weight of recorded observation. Lady Isolde realized that knowledge was both shield and blade. Possession ensured survival, discretion protected status, and revelation could ignite scandal. The artifacts in her hands, handkerchief, flower, note, ledger, became a nexus of power, desire, and secrecy, codifying acts that blurred law and obsession, authority and pleasure. Each object, each annotation, each whispered echo was proof that the hall was not merely a physical space, but a nexus of ritualized dominance, coercion, and observation. Lady Isolde's awareness of these mechanisms allowed her to navigate the hierarchy with precision, balancing secrecy, ritual, and revelation. Beyond the dais, shadows shifted, hinting that the final revelation of scandal, desire, and power lay just beyond the next archway, waiting silently to confront the world.